You know the story of Adam and Eve, right?
Yeah,
All right. And in that story, the snake devil was like, "Eat this apple. Don't follow
correct.
them rules. It's cool." Do you think the snake devil was the good guy or the bad guy in that story? Because it's supposed to be obviously the bad guy because he
He
basically got people kicked
deceived.
out, yeah, and lied.
Yeah.
But to me, I feel like he was kind of a good guy.
Well, this is actually an interesting question that I've thought about, not necessarily the Adam and Eve portion, but in regards to Lucifer and hell and its place in religion. So, your argument for the snake being a good guy is that he exposed like how bad Adam and Eve were on the inside?
No, so let me go into detail about
Yeah.
this. So my argument is that in the story of Adam and Eve, God or whatever gave them free will, right?
Yes.
But forbid them to eat from the tree of knowledge. So to me, what good is free will if you don't have the knowledge to use it? You know what I mean? Because if you have free will and you're able to do whatever you want, you're still ignorant though. You still don't know like what's out there for you. You still don't know.
So,
You know.
no, you're saying that the snake actually helped out Adam and Eve.
Yes.
Because he allowed them to have knowledge.
Yes.
Oh, I see. I've never looked at it that way, but I understand the argument to a point because, yeah, why would God give us free will within range? You can only do so much within free will. I mean, over the course of history, that's perceived as a sin. That was the first sin?
Yeah.
That was the first. It wasn't a mortal sin. There are different types of sin. But I guess, I mean, we're free to do whatever we want now, and there's still, laws. Like, we can't murder someone. I mean, we could, but we'd go to jail. That's against the law. So,
Yeah, but obviously, I feel like that's on a different level, though.
in what sense?
So, I mean, like, imagine, like, right now, if it was illegal to get an education.
Well, I mean, laws are interesting in and of themselves because laws change over time and can be overturned. Like this whole instance with Amy, I forget the nomination for the Supreme Court justice. With her being Supreme Court justice, then everyone's talking about, well, then she could overrule Roe v. Wade, which has been in state since like the 70s.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about. This year, marijuana became legalized in Illinois to an extent. So what about all the people that were, for years that were charged with possession or, like they can't get that time back. They served it. So laws are interesting. I don't know where we went with that, but yeah, laws are interesting in and of themselves. But that is a more microcosm to a more larger philosophical debate about Adam and Eve and free will and God's law. I mean, generations had passed since Adam and Eve to like when God actually made his 10 commandments. So like what was God's plan for us, or was there one? Why did there become one?
I don't really know. Like, you know me, I'm not a very religious person. I guess I haven't thought about it to that extent, like what the whole plan was. Because to me, like, the plan, there was no plan. It doesn't,
Yeah.
So thinking about it, like, let's say if these were things, I don't know what the plan would have been.
What I was referencing earlier, when we would take philosophy or morality, theology in school, I always wondered about Lucifer's place in God's plan. Because, heaven's supposed to be an ideal place where we go and it's euphoria or whatever. But you can't go there if, like, you're a fundamentally bad person. Well, so where do those bad people go? Okay, well, they go to hell. They're tormented, for all eternity. But if Lucifer's that's his job to keep bad people punished, isn't he technically inherently doing a good thing then? Because he's torturing those who deserve to be tortured down in hell for doing bad things and for sinning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's not so different from being an officer or like a sheriff at a county. You know what I mean? Like, you're keeping bad people where they should be, theoretically speaking. So isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, like he's doing the job that was set for him.
Yeah, like it was a job made for him almost. Like, that was his purpose. I remember having this argument way back in high school, and I brought it up to ironically enough. And her rebuttal to me was something like, well, okay, well, Lucifer was kicked out of heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't allowed in anymore. So it could be seen as, well, the devil doesn't necessarily want to be doing this. That could be his punishment. In hell for all eternity, he has to torture all of these people who wind up being kicked out from heaven. Like that's not what that's not what we were just talking about. That's not his job, but that's his form of punishment. He's trapped down here away from heaven, and so thus he tortures people. In which case, well, then I don't think he would be such a
Yeah, like is he a bad person? No, he's doing his time.
yeah. Have you ever watched Lucifer?
Yes.
How's that? What's the depiction of Lucifer? Isn't he a good guy? Like he's the main character of the show, no?
Like apparently, from like I said, I watched it a while ago. From what I remember, he's like upsetty spaghetti. The fact that he's portrayed as like a bad person.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He's like, like I'm doing what I'm like meant to be doing. It's a job. Like I hate that people look at me this way, but like I'm just literally like I'm just doing my job.
Yeah. Sympathy for the devil, Ivan?
Oh, like to me, it's all fucked because like. Going back to what you're saying, like, people who are fundamentally bad get punished and go to hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I mean, I feel like anybody can be fundamentally bad given the circumstances that they're placed in. And I feel like if you're being punished for all eternity's a long-ass time.
Yeah.
Having a, like, 60 or, 80-year max time frame to be judged for all eternity seems kind of,
Everything's circumstantial. Like, everyone can be fundamentally good or bad within a certain range, and I think that's true. Like everyone is inherently capable of doing bad things. Bad people on the flip side are capable of doing good things. So I don't know how this merit system works as to whether or not you're going to hell or not.
Well, I mean, the way I was looking at it is like if you were born like with a silver spoon in your mouth. Like, it's very easy for you to do good things, start up a charitable organization, go to church, do all the things, you want to do to be a good person. And they might be altruistic, they might be genuinely good things you're doing, but you have the means to do those things. Let's say you're like in a very like a bad city where there's lots of crime, and your only means of actually surviving are genuinely to like commit crimes.
Mm-hmm. I was watching random clips on Instagram the other day, and I ended up watching Sarah Silverman. She was on some sort of podcast, but it was very informative. She was talking about cancel culture and in today's society, and how one of her best friends used to be a neo-Nazi, and obviously they would do not so great things because it's a hate group and whatever. But he left that life behind him. But say like if he during that time in his or her life, I don't remember, they had tweeted something, that was pro their hate group, and someone found that now and was like, I found you do this awful thing 10 years ago, and now you're canceled or whatever. Well, at what point do we forgive a person, for progressing 10 years later? Remember that whole James Gunn scenario where he said awful things years ago? But he's grown and changed since then. People grow and change. Things change over time. She said the reason her friend had been drawn towards the neo-Nazi group is because, as we're younger, our minds are more malleable. We want to go where we're accepted and where we feel the most love. And she said her friend, when they were young, the parents just weren't around, and not so much that they were, negligent, but they just, he was seeking for love. He would go out, he'd smoke or whatever. And he was brought in, he found love and acceptance and brotherhood within a hate group, which was the neo-Nazi group. So does that make him a bad person, him or her a bad person, just because that's where they felt the most accepted for a while?
I think that's a big issue. Is like, what's the whole cancel culture? Is like you were saying, like people can change. People can genuinely change.
People do change.
Yeah, and to be judged on something you did years ago, when you've clearly changed your views and who you are as a person, like even fundamentally, like I don't know, it just seems
not cool.
Yeah,
it's like we're not allowing people to be able to grow and change.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm trying to bring it back more to theological questions. Well, is that fair to be able to judge someone for all eternity for their sins and crimes, depending on how harsh, their actual crimes in this life were? I don't know. I mean, that's a tricky question, and I think it's one that, Catholics or Christians have struggled with over the years as well. For a while there wasn't a purgatory. Purgatory was invented to answer, like, well, where do babies go if a baby dies before their
Baptism?
Before they're baptized into the religion? You're like, well, they had no time to be baptized to accept Jesus or whatever. So where do they go? They shouldn't go to hell, but technically speaking, because of the dogma, they can't go into heaven. So then they created purgatory. But over time, purgatory has been seen as like a weird in-between where, well, you're not good enough to get into heaven, but you weren't so bad that you're going to hell. Yeah, you'll go to purgatory. Things change, and even theological ideas and concepts change too. So for a soul to be damned for eternity in hell seems pretty uncool to me.
Yeah. Man, this started off as a question about free will, but I feel like we definitely deviated from that.
I mean, what is free will? All of my thoughts are mine, right? Well, technically, I mean, all of my thoughts are just thoughts that other people have had that I've gained and absorbed. So is it really my own thought process, or am I just kind of a melting pot of other ideas that have been expressed throughout the history that I just happen to come across? You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, so final question.
Yeah.
Do you think the devil was a bad guy?
Is the devil a bad guy? Well, I hope I answered your question, Ivan, over the course of these 17 minutes. I think the devil is a guy.
Accept that.
But you know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
Like, there's a gray area. The devil had his own mindset of what he wanted to do, and he got punished for it, and that's just a big macro scale kind of idea, parable of, what goes on in real life. We have our own set of rules that we're confined to, and we make our own choices as to whether or not we want to follow them or not. If that makes us a bad person or not, I don't know.
So what you're trying to get at is you think the devil's aight.
He's all right. Devil's all right. We're all right. Who's to say, Ivan? Who am I to judge the devil?